Okay, so lesson there.
Peter, you have two important roles, okay? The number one is that you're an American economist, and you want to champion for the best policy that serves the best interest of the American people and the American economy. And you also have an important role. You're the ambassador of the new federal state of China. So my question to you is that how do you make the connection between these two roles? And does the best policy that serves the interest of American economy is also beneficial to taking down the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah. See, this is a really easy answer, and I actually wrote it years ago in my Death by China book. If I had to write that book today, by the way, Miles, I would have called it Death by CCP. You know what I'm saying? Long live the new federal state of China. That would have been the subtitle, right? It's an easy answer because I argue there's actually a chapter in the book about how I argue that the economic reforms that I was preaching for China to adopt would actually be better for communist China, right? It's if they were able to abide by the rules of fair trade, their workers would not be under these tremendous human rights abuses. They'd earn decent wages. They would have free to have wonderful families, enjoy freedoms, have more free time. It would be a very prosperous economy. I think there was a few reformers in China, communist China, who tried to go down that road. And they inevitably either wound up dead or in jail. Right?
Again, preceded by Miles Guo.
By Miles Guo, because the Communist Chinese Party simply doesn't trust anything but their authoritarian market. You know, this whole thing about how look, folks, particularly in Communist China, listening to this. I mean, the mindset of your leaders. I go back to the days of Mao, and you and I had a very heartfelt discussion before this offline about how your parents, when you were a young child, were victims of Mao's Cultural Revolution, and you were forced to go and raise pigs on the farm, and all of that. But there was a policy under Mao. You'll get it. You'll give me the exact terminology, but it was something like the Four Sparrows program, or something that is related to what Mao tried to do in this kind of command and control fashion, was kill all the pests. Thought it was like a good idea to get rid of the rats and the sparrows.
That's so absurd.
And what happened was, I mean, there was like peasants out like banging on pots and pans and flushing out the
steel factory
rodents, and they killed them. And what happened was, in the absence of those pests, those perceived pests, they had other pests grow because the one pest ate the other pest, and they wound up losing all of their grain crop. And no laughing matter, and I don't know if your parents suffered this directly, but literally tens of millions of people died. Now, it was this idea in the communist mind that somehow you can control everything, and I think that's what's going on. They created the virus. Maybe they know more than we do about how dangerous it is. They think the only way to do it is to weld senior citizens into their apartments and not feed them. I mean, that's why we need the new federal state of China, in a nutshell.
Thank you. So, Peter, there have been a lot of theories about economical decoupling from the communist China.
Yes.
What is your theory about economical decoupling, and how will it affect our mission of taking down the Chinese Communist Party from the American economical standpoint?
when I was in the Trump administration, the boss, I like to call him the boss, POTUS and I, President of the United States, he and I were totally aligned with the idea that we had to use very stiff tariffs on communist China to force communist China to stop what I called at the time the 7 deadly sins. And this was things like intellectual property theft, state-owned enterprises, currency manipulation, counterfeit, go on and on and on. And there was a faction inside the White House, they call it the globalist Wall Street transactionalist faction. People like Steve Mnuchin, Larry Kudlow, Gary Cohn before him. These are all Wall Street guys who leech off the workers of the world.
Globalist.
Yeah, and they fought to somehow try to come up with a trade deal with China. I always argued from the get-go that it was a mistake, that whatever they would agree to, they would never fulfill. I've turned out to be almost as good a prophet on that as Miles Guo is on everything else. But my point is that there's no question we are at a point now where the rest of the world needs to decouple from communist China as a way of basically raising up the manufacturing base, the defense industrial base, and middle class of this country, and stop feeding the Chinese Communist beast.
Yeah.
One of the equations you have to understand, and this was frightening when I looked at these numbers, the trade deficit that American consumers run with the Chinese Communist Party is almost exactly equal to what? Their military budget. So we are in effect paying the Chinese Communist Party to build up the missiles that are aimed at Taiwan, the missiles that are aimed at our naval fleets, the submarines that they're building. And Stalin, the Russian leader in World War II, the one, again, history is always a guide and can also be frightening. The gulags in communist China, true story, were built using the plans that Stalin and the Russians, the Soviet Union, gave to the communist Chinese. And we have to break the communist Chinese economy, not to hurt the good people of China, but to liberate them. To liberate them, because otherwise we are going to continue this status quo of communist China building up wealth at the expense of the rest of the world, squandering wealth because of their evil system. And there's a collapse coming there, mind you. There is a collapse coming there. But between now and that collapse, there's just so much damage that the CCP is doing to the people of China as well as the rest of the world.